How I Got Here, the inside stories of startups and innovation in travel and transportation, with your hosts, PhocusWire's Kevin May and Mozio's David Litwak. Hello, everyone, and welcome to How I Got Here, Mozio and PhocusWire's weekly podcast about innovators in travel and transportation. Today, we have Martin Rastellino of Despegar on the podcast. Martin founded Despegar 21 years ago, with four friends who met at Duke's Fuqua Business School. Despegar has grown to be the name in Latin American online travel, with two major brands of Despegar and Decolar, and recently acquired brands like Almundo and Best Day. Thank you for joining us, Martin.
Hi, thank you for having me here. Pleasure to be here.
So we like to start every one of these interviews off the same way, which is for us to ask you to tell us how you got here.
Well, actually, that's, as you said, a long story. It started almost 21 years ago. I have much more hair than today back then. And actually, the story of the company, as you said, started in 1999 while we were studying an MBA in the US, and we created a company by a group of friends. And I always said that we were lucky enough to live in the US between 97 and 99, which was the internet boom. And we lived there, and I think that we all shared the interest of technology, etc. And one of us, Roberto Subiron, which was the founder and the guy that put us together, came up with the idea of doing an online travel agency. And from then we started a roller coaster. We started a great path of 20 years with a lot of fun. So after 20 years, the company, as I said, is a leading online travel agency in Latin America. We went public in 2017 at the New York Stock Exchange. And well, although I'm not involved in the day-to-day activities of the company anymore, I'm still part of the board of directors of the company. And that's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin, for joining us. This is Kev here in the UK. Yourself and a group of friends started this, but it's more than just one or two co-founders. This is a fairly big co-founding team. So take us right back, if you can, Martin. I mean, how did you all become friends? How did the process of, you said that you suddenly decided that you wanted to start an online travel agency, but that's quite arguably a difficult thing for a group of friends to do, with different dynamics and all those kind of things. So talk us through that makeup and the personalities that were all involved.
Okay. Yeah, as you said, that's a key part of the company. And I would say that because we were not friends for always, I mean, some of us, we met at the MBA, so we started studying together, etc. And I think that the first thing we shared was the interest for technology. Individually, each of us realized what was going on in terms of the internet boom, and we said we wanted to be part of that. So when Roberto came up with the idea of OTA, we said, this is great. And when we started analyzing the business, etc., we realized that it made a lot of sense. But I think that first of all, what we shared was the common interest for the technology, etc. And then I would say that probably we hadn't analyzed that much at that time, but something that I think that we share more than the technology interest. We share values, etc. Because, I mean, after these 20 years, we interacted and we worked a lot together, and a lot of good things, bad things happen. And I would say that the only way to be able to survive or to create that was because of the group dynamics. And I would say that was when someone asked me about what went good, or what are the things that why you think we were successful. I think one of the main things were about the group dynamics. I mean, and that was very natural from day one, and we started working together, each one in a different role, nobody thinking about politics, nobody thinking about what the other guy is doing, just focusing ourselves on doing a great company. And I think that was great and was one of the key advantages. And just an anecdote, but as I said, today we are not involved in the company on the day-to-day activities anymore, but at some point we decided to start something fresh. But what we did was we bought an office and we are working together, the five of us, in different projects, but again, together again, and there's no obligation at all to do that. We are doing that because after 20 years, we're still having fun doing things together. So probably that's a silly example, but something that shows the importance of the group dynamics, and the people that you choose.
Now, it's interesting because you said you came together very naturally and you found your roles within the company naturally. How did you decide amongst the group of you who was going to take on the commercial role and who's going to take on the IT role and who's going to be the CEO? And how you know, I'm assuming you didn't just flip a coin or something like that. I mean, how did you figure out naturally which roles were going to be best suited to which person?
Well, I would say that there was one clear role that was the one of the CEO, that was Roberto, and since he was the one that brought the idea and put the team together, he was the CEO from day one. But other than that, I would say that we always worked as a group, and we choose the different roles based on two things. One was the needs of the company. The company needed different things over time, and basically based on the skills of each of us. And for example, at the beginning of the company, I was in charge of opening operations across Latin America. When that was done, then I moved to operations, etc. So I think that we based that a lot based on our backgrounds. But I would say that what's very important was that we all play as a team, because as I said, different times of the company requested different skills. And at some points of the company, one position was the most important, and then another one. For example, when we were running out of money, the CFO was God. I mean, he got all the attention. Once you have the money, you have to deliver. So the guy that was running commercial things or operations was more important. So what's funny, or the good thing about this, that no matter which role do we have in the past, and if that particular role was more important in a particular point of time, we all knew that we were a team, that we were working together, and that if now you're the star, probably I'd be the star next year or so. So even more importantly, assigning the roles, I would say that was very important how we acted as a group.
Last one from me for a second. I mean, starting an online travel agency is a daunting idea for anybody. And many of the internet's most successful online travel brands have often started with one thing, say hotels, or with flights, or with packages. How did you decide which particular type of products you would focus on first, and how did that evolve in those very early phases?
Well, actually, we started mostly focusing flights, and that was, I would say, partly because of the technology available at that time. I mean, because of the GDSs that were the companies that were collecting all the information about the flights, etc. So technology was more ready available for flights than for hotels. And that's one of the reasons why most of the OTAs started selling flights. And then I think it was a natural movement from flights to accommodation and then to vacation packages. So I think that it was mostly related to the availability of the technology. In our case in particular, given that we were playing the game in Latin America and the technology there was much worse than other parts of the world, we needed to sometimes to try to get that technology and adapt that to the region so that the availability of the technology play a bigger role in deciding which product, etc.
Martin, David here. So I want to expand a little bit on that. It's a good segue into, talking about how you attack this market. You guys are currently, I think, biggest in Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay, or at least historically, maybe before you bought Beste, which is in Mexico. But how did you think about, sometimes people refer to Latin America as this one big market, but it's really not. Obviously, there's very local quirks. Did you guys decide to focus on one country, or how did you go about, targeting your market?
Okay. No, we knew from day one that we wanted to be a regional player, and actually the only way to succeed would be to be a regional player because Latin America, I mean, if you take a country as a standalone, it's not big enough, but if you take the whole region, it's a decent and attractive market. So we knew that to be successful and to be able to monetize all the IT investments, we should play in the whole region. So we had that in mind from day one, and I think that was one of our differences between our players. And as you said, of course, then in Latin America, the one size fits all is not the best case because, I mean, each country has particular flavors, interests, etc. So although we decided to be a regional player, we open operations in each of the countries with the local teams, etc. So it was kind of think global but act local. I mean, we decided to be a regional player, but we deployed local teams in each of the country to capture the knowledge of, and the taste of and the interest of each country.
What were some of those kind of local quirks? So I know, for example, you guys do a lot of your bookings on payment plans, for example, or at least it did at one point, right? And that's, a very different behavior than exists in America and a lot of other places. And so how did you kind of adapt the, the OTA model? And I guess Expedia was only founded a few years ahead of you in 96 and you guys were founded in 99. So, what did you take from, Expedia and say, this needs to be different for Latin America?
Well, I would say from very simple examples at the beginning to more big examples later on. I mean, I remember in the early days there were huge discussions about the colors that we use in each of the home pages. Like, for example, in Argentina, the people like to have light colors. In Brazil, the people like very bright colors. So it was a big discussion, and I mean, if you put like a light blue, all the customers in Argentina like that, but you go to Brazil and they say, I mean, nobody pays attention to this. So from these very silly details to the type of products that you choose. I mean, some countries use more financing in terms of installments where they buy flights or packages than others, etc. So I would say that today, if I have to say, one of the big differences is of understanding, or advantages of understanding the markets is in terms of payments. I mean, having access to local payments and local payment options is a key advantage. But in the past, as I said, in terms of which products to offer, which are the preferences in terms of destinations, etc., played a big difference.
Now, you told us in one of your first answers, Martin, that you had a great spirit amongst the founding team, but no business goes through those, certainly through those early years, without issues and problems that they need to resolve. Given that there were quite a few of you as co-founders, how did you, as a group of friends, as you said, resolve some of the problems that you may have faced? Was it always put into the CEO's hand to make the final decision, or did you have another more democratic way of sorting issues out between you?
No, I would say that we played as a team a lot, and we always had a pretty open discussion among us. And of course, at some point, if especially with matters among us, etc., if someone had to decide, it was the CEO. But I think that we always acted as a group, and most of the big decisions, all of us, we participated in them. And I think that were one of the advantages of us, of being more than one and having the very different ways of understanding things. And we always try to be pretty open in terms of the discussions. And that was very useful.
And when you were expanding into other countries, were there occasions when you thought this particular market is just too difficult for us, because whether it was infrastructure or whether the marketing was too difficult or for some other reasons, did you ever have to pull out or think of things in a completely different way because the market was so challenging that you were going into?
Yeah, I would say so. And I would say that the case of, we didn't pull out, but Brazil presented to us a big challenge. And basically, all of the founders are from Argentina. And between Argentinians and Brazilians, there is a big rivalry. Everything. So it was very hard for us to understand the Brazilian market, and for them to understand that they were working with a team of Argentinians. So that was a big challenge, and took us many years to fully understand the market and to be successful there. And actually, what we did is one of us went to live to Brazil for some years.
Okay.
To understand the market, and internally we always put a goal of us traveling to Brazil every month or every 2 months to make sure that we all understood the market, because it was and it is the biggest market in the region. And but we really need to think as Brazilians to make sure that we would succeed. So that I would say was a biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges, and that's the way but we didn't pull out. I mean, that's the way we approached it, and I think it took time, but we end up being successful there.
Did you, Despegar was there so early on in the history of online travel. I mean, you launched long before some of the most well-known brands that are in the market now even existed. So you're almost one of the pioneers yourselves. But I'm interested, did you ever look at some of the other brands that were in the markets in other countries? So Expedia, Make My Trip, Apodo in Europe, which was a big one back in the early 2000s, and learn anything from what they were doing that you then brought into the way you maybe did things at Despegar at all?
Yes, actually, when we started, I think that the biggest player was Travelocity, and then Expedia. So we looked a lot at them, and we we used them as a model a lot. Of course, we needed to adapt that models to Latin America, what we tropicalized the models. but we use them a lot as a model. And but for example, one of the big differences was that, when they started, they were mostly online. When we started business in Latin America, nobody was trusting e-commerce. So we need to open call centers because the people said, okay, I like the price that you have, but there is no way I'm gonna put my credit card on your website. So we need to open call centers, and at some point at the beginning, we even needed to open offices for the people to bring their credit card and pay. So yes, we use Travelocity and Expedia as a model a lot, but we also need to adapt those models to Latin America.
Interesting. Great.
So yeah, it's funny actually. That was about the question I was about to ask, because I think some point in, was it 2016 or 2017, around then, you guys phased out your call centers, and I think that segues us into a very interesting discussion about, in an emerging market, what intermediary steps do you need to do to kind of onboard people almost and educate them about the internet in addition to starting your business. And so you mentioned the call center. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe as in general how you navigated that entire dilemma of basically launching an internet business in a place that wasn't as trusting of it?
Yes, I would say that we did that with a lot of confidence on what we were doing. We knew that, in Latin America, people like personal relationships, and they add a lot of value on that. But we have a clear view that if the technology is good and is good for the people, sooner or later, the people will adapt it. So we knew that we wanted to be an e-commerce company, a technology company, and we knew that the technology will make good for the people. So we use the call centers or the offices to receive people, etc., as necessary steps to reach the final goal, that was to be a pure online company. So as you said, we educated the people. At the beginning, I remember the first homepage that we have was full of information rather than the transactional homepage, and because people wanted to believe that. So I remember that we used to hire journalists from each country to write content for free and tips and advice, because we said we want the people to get accustomed to the brand, to the website, and at some point in the future, if they trust us, they will buy from us. But at the beginning, we need to focus more on giving something for free, and that was information. And then, as I said, open offices. I remember that people was, in Latin America, the big cities, traffic jam is a mess. But although that, the people were traveling or commuting an hour just to bring the credit card, because they didn't want to put the credit card in the website. And I said, okay, if they want to do that, let's do that. If we have to pay parking for them, we'll do that, because at some point that's going to change. So I would say that we took a lot of steps, but knowing that at some point that would change. Making sure, with the conviction that the technology was good for the people, and sooner or later they will change that part.
So I wanted to segue the conversation a little bit into crises, and obviously in the industry we're in a big one right now, but what I find amazing is that you started right before the dot-com burst, and there have been more than a few Argentinian currency crises and Brazilian currency issues as well. And little fact, Mozio actually, about a third of our employees are in Argentina, in Cordoba in particular. And we were about 9 years old, and I have personally lived through kind of employees asking for money into U.S. bank accounts so they can exchange it on the black market at a 1.5x multiple. And I know all of the things that have gone down over the past 9 years for Mozio, with just kind of a little bit of exposure to your market. And how can you elaborate a little bit of how you guys withstood so many crises, and how did you particularly think about the instability that is kind of inherent in a lot of these Latin American countries when it comes to simple things like payments?
Yeah, I would say that you get accustomed to crisis, and basically we know, and we knew from day one that you used to live with crisis, and one of the things that we did to counter that or to mitigate that risk was to have operations in very different countries, because in Latin America you always know that you will always have a country in crisis. If it's not, of course, Argentina, where I'm from, and Venezuela are the premium ones, the ones that have a crisis every year. But if it's not Argentina or Venezuela, it's Mexico, Brazil, or Colombia. So you know that you will have always a crisis in one country. So one thing that we did is we have to be in many countries. So we'll always have a crisis, but then we will have countries that won't have crisis. And I would say that then, you get accustomed to that. You get accustomed to be more flexible. And, at the end, I also think that, crises generate opportunities. And it's not just a phrase. In our case, for example, in 2001, Argentina faced a very big crisis. And, but for us, it was the opportunity to build a brand almost for free, because nobody wanted to put money on commercials and on advertising. And so we went to see the airlines and the hotels, and we said, if you give us some tickets and some room nights, we can do a combined campaign with you and us. And we say, okay, that's good. And then we went to the TV shows and the radios, and we said, okay, we have these tickets and these nights to do a trip for the people at the TV. So, and in exchange of that, we can have our brand in your TV show. And they said that's great. So that was a way in which, instead of investing money and putting money, we just use tickets and room nights from our players to develop a brand. So I would say that, in many cases, and crises generate opportunities. So you have to have an open mind for that.
Did you ever? I remember, here in the UK, there was a fairly long period of time where economists and politicians and people in the travel industry were always talking about the BRIC economies: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And Brazil was one of the countries that you launched in as well. Did you ever feel that you had to live up to some kind of expectations from the rest of the world to make things work there, because there was so much interest economically in Brazil in particular, being such a success story as a country economy?
Yeah, I would say I remember that time, and when that happened, there was a time in which our investors said that they just care about Brazil and they didn't care about the rest of Latin America. And at some point they even say, your name should not be Despegar anymore. The name of the company should be Decolar, which is the brand that we use in Brazil. Mm-hmm. So, and that probably, for some time we put more focus in Brazil because of that, and we got more pressure from them because that's Brazil. But other than that, I would say that, we agree that Brazil was the biggest market for us and was the most important one. And but we always try to have a long-term view about what to do. So when everybody was crazy about Brazil, we said, okay, Brazil is really important. but we are not. We were still going to pay attention for the rest of the countries, etc. And then when something wrong, bad happened in Brazil, and people were not thinking about Brazil anymore, I said, okay, so Brazil is still important. So yes, we got some pressure, but especially with Brazil, but other than that, not a big deal.
Talk to us a little bit, if you can, Martin, about 2014, 2015, when I'm guessing that's probably when your conversations with Expedia started, because they invested a very sizable amount of money in the company in 2015, $270 million. I mean, what was the thinking as a founding team and as a management team, and as you know, in the conversations that you would have had with your investors at the time about that approach and taking that money from such a big a big global player like Expedia?
It was a big decision, I would say, but in general terms, we were working with Expedia as commercial partners.
Yep.
Before that, so we knew Expedia for a while, and we had a very good commercial relationship with them before them investing in the company. So that was, I would say, something that helped it. But other than that, I mean, from day one, we knew that we were not able to build a company just ourselves. So we always relied on money or investment from third parties. At the beginning, it was banks and private equity firms. Actually, a French travel group, a also an investor in the company at the beginning. So I would say that we were accustomed to have big holders and big partners, etc. Of course, Expedia was a little bit different because in some way we compete. But I think that it was a deal in which both parties thought that there was an advantage of doing that, because there were a lot of, while we compete in some markets, we also have a lot of complementary business. For example, they gave us access to all of the networks of their network of hotels out of Latin America, and they are taking advantage of our hotel networks in the region. So I would say that it was a deal that made a lot of sense for both parties, and also we knew them in advance from previous commercial relationships. So although it was a very big decision, it was not a tough one.
David?
Yeah, so Martin, you said something interesting earlier when you talked about how you went to these hotels and airlines, and got free flights and hotel rooms, and then went to the TV shows and got them to kind of like put your brand on. And I love that because it's just like a win-win. And I almost feel like, you've, and I think this is like what I see with some of the best startups. Your value add is creativity, almost like you didn't actually have the hotel room, you didn't have the audience, but you were the creative person who actually could like match them up. And this is maybe a little bit of an open-ended question, but I'd love if you have any other stories like that. Very, very bluntly, I think those are the types of things I don't see startup entrepreneurs doing enough these days, is kind of figuring out how you can, arrange everyone around you, add value without actually spending any financial capital yourself, but getting that positive brand equity, out of it.
Yeah, I would say that was a clear example. And I don't know, something story happened at the beginning when as I said, when we started the business in Latin America, nobody was doing anything in internet, and it was very. We decided to partner with local travel agencies at the beginning, so that we didn't had to spend too much time on the back office, and we could spend more time on developing the brand and the technology. So we needed to convince each of the travel agencies in each country to say, again, we're going to give you traffic and sales leads, and you're going to pay us a commission for that. It's a win-win. And but although it was pretty clear that it was mutually beneficial for everyone, I mean, it took us a huge effort to convince them to do that. And so we needed to spend a lot of time and effort convincing the travel agencies to partner with us. And it was tough, but it was another example that we used to, at that time, not to save money, but to save time, because we said if we wanted to be a travel agency, a legal travel agency from day one in each country, it's going to take us like 2 years. So why don't we put more emphasis in the technology, in the brand, and we partner with a local player in each country to do that. And then I would say another anecdote that probably was in which we use a lot of creativity and play very well was at the very beginning. We didn't have too much money to start the company, but we had the network of fellow students from the MBA. So we call our fellow students in each of the countries in which we were opening operations. I mean, someone from Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Argentina, etc. And we said to them, I mean, we know each other from the MBA. We wanted to open this business, and we don't have too much money, and we don't have money to hire a law firm, a consulting firm, etc. So, but if you can help us and you want to be part of the project, you can help opening the business, giving local advice, giving us local advice, etc. And we can give you a stock option plan on the company. So it was like we opened the network of countries, like I remember 6 countries in 3 months with almost no money, just using the connections that we have from the MBA. So it was a pretty fast and low cost launching of the company.
So I've just one or two from me really, just before we kind of wrap up, Martin. I mean, just talk us through a little bit about that road leading up to the company going public, and that's the first part of the question. And I suppose I think for me the more interesting part is often, how does that feel when you list your company on the public markets, and then you all started stepping down from your particular roles? You know, this was your child that you'd all helped create, and suddenly you're all starting to step away. I mean, Damien came in as the CEO, and you're now all doing other things. How does that feel as a founder to kind of let things go? It's almost like the child has grown up and left home almost. But I mean, how do you deal with that kind of almost psychologically?
Well, I would say that, I mean, it was a privilege for us to be able to live the whole process of creating a company, making a project, making it successful, and making it so successful that the company can succeed you. And so if I have to say something, thank you. I mean, we are really proud, and we think that we are privileged of doing that. Regarding the IPO, I would say that, I mean, we have always seen that as a natural step. Although we were always focused more on building the company and being the #1 company rather than an exit strategy. I mean, our goal was always to bring the largest company in Latin America in travel. And but we knew that at some point, because of the size of the company, etc., it was making an IPO was the clear path. So basically, it was a process that we started preparing, like I would say 3 years ago, in terms of preparing the systems, the legal structure, administrative structure, the team, etc., to have a company ready for an IPO. And I would say that when the company went public, it was a dream came true. Seeing the company, seeing your baby at the stock exchange was a privilege. It was so great. I mean, after so many years, so many efforts, so much passion, that was great. So I mean, everything we can say is gratitude. And then regarding the decision of stepping down, etc., I think that, I mean, it was also a natural thing, was something that at some point we wanted to do, to have a fresh start. And it was a great decision because basically, as I said, it was the clear example of that we built something that would succeed us.
Yeah, interesting. A very, very last quick one from me. I mean, briefly, what one thing do you miss about running the company as a founder now that you've left the business behind you? I know you're still involved as a board director. What's the one thing that you miss about the company?
I'm not sure if I miss something.
Maybe nothing. Maybe you don't miss anything at all, possibly.
I think I got a good balance because I'm still involved, not in day-to-day activities. So I'm still involved as part of as a board member, and we are still working together with the founders, doing different things, etc. So I would say that we're in the best of both worlds.
Okay, well, that's great. I mean, it sounds like you've ended up in a very good place, both professionally and personally. The way everything kind of worked out so well with the creation and the growth of the company, and then the eventual listing on the public markets. We obviously haven't even touched upon what's been happening this year, but certainly the backstory to Despegar is really interesting, and we really thank you for joining us on this episode of How I Got Here, Martin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and hopefully also it's a good idea for someone to start doing some entrepreneurship projects as well.
Okay. Again, thanks ever so much, Martin. This is another episode of How I Got Here. These are Mozio and PhocusWire's weekly discussions with the entrepreneurs and innovators in travel and transportation. We thank you, as always, for listening. If you're a non-subscriber, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast and use the usual places. Leave us a review, leave us some feedback. If you think you are a founder that's got a good story to tell, we're always interested to hear people that might want to pitch their story to us and get on the show. So you know where to find us in all the usual places as well, on mozio.com and also PhocusWire.com for me. So again, thanks ever so much to everybody for listening. Thanks again to Martin, and on behalf of David and I, thanks ever so much to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the How I Got Here podcast. We'll be back next week with more insight stories behind startups and innovation in travel and transportation. Check mozio.com/move for a complete write-up of the highlights of every podcast with translations into 5 languages, and get your daily dose of news on the digital travel economy by subscribing to the newsletter at PhocusWire.com. See you next week.